All right, why show matters, and I'm really pumped here because in 3 commands we have scaffolded out a ton of structure, and like it's hard for me to just contain this, and I'm gonna go a little bit off script here, and actually we're gonna look at this structure. Um, we started with Flask new, and we scaffolded out a Flask application. And that gave us a whole bunch of boilerplate files that we could edit. And then we, in the first command, did Flask make view, recipes index, and we wired up the route, the controller, and the model. And so we have a place where we can see in our web application all our recipes. So slash recipes. So think of like you'll have a recipe for pizza, you'll have a recipe for um, lasagna. Obviously, I'm hungry for Italian food here, so maybe spaghetti. But then each one of these would be like a little card. You'd click that card and it would navigate you to that recipe. And then here you would see that exact recipe. This is the show page. So, uh, I mean, we ha- I'm just going to kind of reiterate. We have the first command gave us all the list of all the recipes. Second command gave us a place to show a specific recipe. But even more importantly, we have a clear route controller view pattern, and it's all tied to a backend. And let's go in to let's go into VS Code, and let's say you haven't been here for a while, and you're like, what was I doing in this project? If you come in here, you can see in the app. Okay, you're probably going to go into models and you're going to say, oh, okay, I have a recipes. Um, let's actually let's believing is seeing. So let's, if you haven't used this before, TablePlus is a great place where you can see your data. So let's hook up TablePlus. Let's put some data in there. Let's do a migration. And I know that's not what Flask Commands is about, but this would be the next step. We've wired up all this structure. So let me just show you how easy that next step is so you can actually see this in your application. So I'm going to select a SQLite database, and then here what you do is you just select the file which was already built for you right there. It's the one that ends with .db. It should have your application name underscore dev.db. So let's just open that up, and we'll call this cooker, and we'll save it because I'll come back to it. All right. So when I open this up, I am going to see all the models that I have, all the tables I have. Right now, I just have user. We have recipes, but we haven't made that migration. So let's just kind of view user real quick. You have it's nice here. When you click on the table, you see the data, but when you go over to structure, you actually see what the columns are and how they're defined. So really, user is just a username, and then I'm not going to worry about this password scenario. So that's kind of outside the scope of Flask commands. But we'll put some users in there, and it's really easy to do that. You can do it right here in the app. You can actually just say, okay, I'm going to have a user Drew, and save it. And so now user 1 is Drew, and I'm going to have a user Sam, and maybe Sue. All right. So we've got 3 users. There are the usernames, Drew, Sam, and Sue. Let's go over and let's bring in recipes, but I'm going to need more than what I have right here. So let's make 2 additional columns onto recipes. So I said things like you're going to want spaghetti, lasagna, pizza. You need some kind of either name or title of the recipe. I'm just going to call it title for right now. I often use name though. So what I'm typing here is I'm giving under the columns, and this is just comment section for me that tells me here are the columns of the model and the columns in the database table. So I'm going to say it's going to be a DB column, and then you have to, so this tells it to make it a column, and then you have to give it the type. And so in this case, it's just like a string. So DB string, and then you give it a length. So I'm just going to say 128. Just, you can put whatever number, that's how long that string can be in your database. And then a couple of things I like to add is it nullable? Can you leave it blank? And it doesn't make sense to me to have a recipe that doesn't have a name. Like, here's the recipe for I don't know what. So we're going to say nullable is equal to false. And I'm going to make it so that the recipes, the name of that recipe or the title of that recipe is unique. I don't want two pizzas. I want like the pizza 1 and pizza 2 or something of that nature. Equals true. Okay. The other thing I'm going to add in here, and this is really not part of Flask Commands, but this is, I mean, I have to kind of show you some of this because why else would you use Flask Commands if you're not going to build a Flask application? So let's suppose that we want to tie a recipe back to whoever wrote it. So it's like, who is the author of this recipe? That would go back to our users table. And a lot of times you would just say user ID like this. So then you would have DB column and DB, and the value in there is going to be an integer. It's like, this is user 1 is Drew, user 2 is Sam, that kind of thing. So we would have integer. And then we need to tell it that it's related back to the users table. So we would do DB foreign key, and it's the user's ID. And if you don't want it to be nullable, you need to say nullable is equal to false. I'm going to allow it to be nullable so that you could have recipes not made by people, just hanging out there as somebody made them, but we don't know who. But if you want it to make it false, then you would say false. Okay, but I'm actually going to change this name, and that's completely fine. You do not have to call it user ID, even though it goes back to the users table. I'm going to call this author ID. Okay, so that though just creates that column. That doesn't create the relational. I mean, it sets this foreign key up in the database, but we want to be able to have a recipe, and so like recipe 1, and say who is the author. So in order to do that, I need relationships. So I actually usually put a second section in here called relationships. Okay, so we are going to have an author relationship, which is going to be a DB relationship, and it's relating to the users table. So you just type in user model for user model, and then you have to put a back populates, which is the table that you're currently in. So recipes. Okay. So with this, we'll just save that. Then we'll come back to our terminal, and we need to be somewhere in our project, and we also need to have the virtual environment active. So I'm in Cooker. I will just say source, then activate. And I need that because I am going to use a migration, because right now we just have these things in we have this model sitting in a Python file. We don't actually have it in our database, which we've seen here, that if I refresh, I do not see recipes. So we're going to make that happen now. So we're going to do Flask db migrate. And then, so this is Miguel's Flask migration package. So we're going to say, and this is the same, anytime you make a change, you just do Flask db migrate. It's really great. And it will go in and figure out what change you made. And then the -m just says, hey, I'm going to leave a message, and I like to tell it what I did. Did I add? Did I update? And then what I added or updated. So I added a recipes table. And so come up with your own kind of convention on the messages here. I just use added or updated or deleted, and then the table name. Okay, so we'll do that. All right, and so that migration is done. There is a migrations folder, and you can see the added recipes table right here. And so we do not, if I come back to TablePlus, we still will not have it. You have to upgrade or update. So you just come in and you say Flask db upgrade and refresh. There it is. And see, it has a title and it has an author. And if you come in here, you can see the author is a foreign key for users.id. So there's that relationship that we wrote in that one line. So let's just add in. We'll add in pizza. And we'll make the author 1. And now when I go and I have this little arrow, it clicks back, it goes to true. So TablePlus is free, but it has limited functionality under the free account. So if I love TablePlus, so check it out. But it's an easy way to kind of see your data and kind of quickly add some things. So let's say salad. So we're trying to eat some healthy stuff, and maybe Sam will make the salad, be the author for the salad. So there's Sam. All right, so what did we do here? So we now have added some columns in. We've hooked it up to our users table, actually. And what we'll do next is we will actually show this here so that when we are viewing the page, we're actually seeing the content. And it's actually terribly not hard to do that with just a little bit of modifications to the controller. So we'll do that. We'll modify the controller in the next video, and we will show basically the titles in the templates, but we'll just keep it plain. So we'll do that in the next video.